Of all the animals that live on our planet, one extraordinary group dominates. It has produced the largest, the blue whale, the fastest, the most intelligent creatures that have ever lived. They're known as the vertebrates. And they all share one vital feature, a backbone. I'm travelling back in time to look for the key advances that drove their remarkable success. So far, I have seen the vertebrates grow from tiny origins to dominate the oceans, colonise the land, and take to the skies. In this programme, I'm going to track the rise of a whole new branch of vertebrate life, the most complex animals yet to appear on Earth. They started as a group of tiny little creatures scarcely bigger than my little finger. Nocturnal animals. But they were to develop into some of the biggest creatures the planet has ever seen. It's a group that also contains us. This is the story of the mammals. I want to investigate how the mammals acquired a new set of key features that allowed them to thrive in every corner of our planet. Features we also have inherited. We will find the evidence in a series of thrilling fossil discoveries and in living animals. With the latest scientific analysis, we'll be able to bring our ancient ancestors back to life. Today, animals with backbones dominate our planet, on land, in the air, and at sea. But how did that evolutionary takeover come about? There have been lots of gaps in the story, but in recent decades, exciting new discoveries have been made here in China, and I'm here to look at them. The rocks of China are yielding up the elusive missing links in the vertebrate story. Ancient creatures preserved as fossils. To find new evidence from the very start of the mammal story, I'm travelling to the south of China and the province of Yunnan. Fossils found here can reveal the kind of world those first mammals encountered and the kind of animals they had to compete with to gain a foothold and survive. This area of southern China is known as the Lufeng Basin. And 180 million years ago, it was a vast natural hollow into which waters from all the surrounding hills flowed. And with those streams came sediment, which is now this. And they also brought the bodies of the animals that lived in those hills, including creatures like this one, a dinosaur. Excavators have uncovered hundreds of specimens like this one in the surrounding countryside. The local museum is crowded with one of the largest collections of complete dinosaur skeletons in the world. But a unique discovery here has revealed some of the earliest evidence for the origins of the animal group that would eventually succeed them. At the same time the dinosaurs were roaming in this area, there was another very different creature evolving in their shadow, one that was on a much, much smaller scale. Paleontologist Wang Tao has spent his life exploring these hills. He's used to finding the remains of large dinosaurs. But on this hilltop site, he and his colleagues discovered something that didn't match the usual profile.
I came to collect fossils with my colleagues in this area here. At the time, it was not like this. There were no crops growing here. After looking around, we followed this little slope. And finally, we found a small fossil about 2 centimeters long. We thought it might be something special, so we sent it to the lab in Beijing to clean it up.
I have travelled north to Beijing to see Wang Tao's discovery for myself. It's now stored in one of the world's leading institutes for the study of fossils. Thank you. And this is it. And what seems extraordinary, near miraculous to me, is that anybody should notice that a tiny, tiny little thing like this is actually a fossil. But a fossil it is. It's the head of a tiny animal. There's the tip of its nose, that's the back of its neck. And you can also see it's got an eye socket. It's called Hadrocodium. If I turn it upside down, you can see the bottom of its jaw. It might be the skull of a really minute little reptile, but it's not, because reptiles have simple cone-shaped teeth, and this one has a tooth that is rather different. That has the shape of a little insect-eating mammal's tooth. So this is one of the earliest mammal fossils we know of. And to that extent, it's the ancestor of all mammals alive today, including ourselves. As such, Hadrocodium holds a key position in the evolutionary story of the backboned animals, the vertebrates. The first creature with the beginnings of a backbone lived over 500 million years ago. Then fish, amphibians, and reptiles evolved. It's from the reptile line that the first mammals emerge. The Hadrocodium fossil dates to 195 million years ago. These simple origins led to the vast diversity of mammals we see around us today. Over 5,700 living species have adapted to survive in every corner of the planet. We humans dominate and are the most numerous of the large mammals. This astonishing journey was built on a series of key evolutionary advances that began in very early forms like Hadrocodium. We only have its skull, but we can work out from modern mammals what the rest of its skeleton was like. So how did this minute animal gain a foothold in the age of the dinosaurs? Kunming City in southern China. I've come to this late-night market to observe one of the first crucial steps in the mammal's story. The development of an amazing feature that gave them a key advantage, but only after dark. The mammals found a niche for themselves not so much in space as in time, at night, when the reptiles are not active. A simple experiment with two pets that happen to be for sale in the market tonight can demonstrate why this is so. This is a thermal camera, and it will show a cold body as a black or very dark. So this lizard, which is on the table, is cold-blooded, and it appears to be very much the same temperature as the table. Reptiles get much of their energy directly from the sun as warmth. But there is no sun at night. As a consequence, it's scarcely got the energy to move. This puppy, on the other hand, is very active. And when you look at him with the camera, you can see that his body is very warm indeed. And you mustn't eat the lizard. The mammals, very early in their history, developed the remarkable ability to generate heat within their bodies. They became warm-blooded, and they achieved this by driving their metabolism at a much higher rate. But to do that, you need extra fuel, extra food. A reptile like a lizard can go for many days without eating. But if a mammal is denied its food for several days, it will die. So in order to keep their fuel bills down, the mammals use the technique familiar to any householder, insulation. They coated their bodies, as this puppy has, with fur. With warm blood and a covering of hair, Hadrocodium was free to hunt for insects in the cool of the night. But now came a new challenge: to find its way around in pitch darkness. Detailed analysis of Hadrocodium's skull is revealing remarkable new evidence of a set of ingenious solutions to this problem. The clues are tiny and invisible to outside scrutiny. But Professor s01e02, an expert on early mammals, is using a micro-CT scanner to unlock the skull's inner secrets. X-rays penetrate the rock and pick out detailed fossil structures within. A computer then builds a 3D model of the bones, and in particular the cavity that once held the brain. Professor s01e02 is able to identify an area that is clearly much larger than its equivalent in a reptile.
If you look at the CT scan here, you can tell that despite a tiny little skull, the brain is enormous. But one of the most striking features of this particular fossil is that it has very large olfactory bulbs.
When you say olfactory bulbs, those are the part of the brain that detects smell.
Correct. This mammal must have had very refined sensory detection of all kinds of smell, allowing it to be active in the dark of the night.
This powerful sense of smell would have helped Hadrocodium pick out the scent of the worms and insects it fed on. The scans have also revealed a radical advance in a second sense that's vital in the dark: hearing. The telltale clue lies, surprisingly, in Hadrocodium's jaw.
One very interesting feature that's so unique about this fossil mammal is very flat jaw. The surface on the inside of the jaw is perfectly flat. In the primitive pre-mammalian forms, there are big grooves.
Grooves like these indicate the presence of two key bones that are attached to the jaw of a reptile. Seen here in green and red. A third bone, coloured blue, transmits sound waves in its ear. In a mammal, there has been a truly amazing evolutionary development. The two jaw bones have shifted to form with the third, the middle ear. This three-bone arrangement opens up a range of higher pitch frequencies that a reptile cannot hear. It's the system we have inherited inside our ears.
So here in hydrocodium, we get the earliest indication that the 3-year bones, so important for our hearing, have already originated with this fossil.
Now ears could pick up the faintest rustle in the undergrowth and guide hydrocodium to any insects moving nearby. Professor Luo's analysis has also identified a spectacular advance in a third key sense.
It also has very large areas responsible for skin touch.
For touch?
That's right. Mammals have hairs. One of the most important functions of the hair is actually to give us the sensory touch, and this animal has already developed that.
The use of hairs as touch sensors is perhaps most obvious from the way modern mammals use their whiskers. This brown rat relies on them for finding its way around at night or underground.
At the base of each of those long hairs on its nose, there is a nerve receptor. And whenever the hair is touched, a message is sent up to the rat's brain.
It's not just the whiskers, though. Hairs all over its body are wired up to its nervous system. This creates a sensory bubble, allowing the rat to map the world around it just by using its hairs. 195 million years ago, the hairs on Hadrocodium must have been wired up in the same way. This remarkable little creature now had a whole array of new powers with which to meet the challenges of the night.
A heightening of the senses, powered by a growing brain, had enabled the early mammals to survive in the shadow of the dinosaurs. And then they also developed a radical new way of nourishing their young.
We can look for clues to this next crucial step in our evolutionary story in Australia. Not in fossils, but in the bodies of two highly unusual creatures that live here. The first is the platypus, which uses its rubbery beak like a radar transmitter to hunt for shrimp or mollusks underwater. And the second is the echidna, which forages for ants and termites on land. The platypus and echidna are the only two survivors of a group of mammals called the monotremes. Trace their genetic line back and we discover they split from all other mammals around 200 million years ago. Because they retain traits from that distant time, they give us a remarkable insight into very early mammals like Hadrocodium. The most extraordinary feature of all is one that no other modern mammal has retained. They lay eggs. This echidna egg is tiny, only about the size of a marble. The hatching process itself has only rarely been captured on film. These are newly hatched platypus young, filmed in their mother's burrow. They're only about the size of jelly beans. The early mammals must have laid eggs in the same way, and they inherited this trait from their reptile ancestors. This is a view inside a reptile egg. The embryo feeds on a supply of highly nutritious yolk. By the time reptiles hatch, they're sufficiently well developed to go looking for their own food. But the platypus and echidna are very different. Their smaller eggs contain only a small amount of yolk, so their young hatch in a far less developed state. They need a lot more nourishment if they're going to grow and survive. But at Healesville Sanctuary near Melbourne, we can find delightful evidence that platypus young do develop with great success without having to leave their mother's burrow. 4 months after it hatched, a youngster is emerging for the first time. It has grown from a tiny hatchling to near adult size. And that is thanks to an amazing form of nourishment that is a defining feature of all mammals. Milk. This rich mixture of proteins, fats, carbohydrates and minerals oozes from the bellies of female platypus and echidna rather like sweat, and provides their young with everything they need to grow. It's likely that early mammals like Hadrocodium nourished their young in the same way, first with a reduced amount of yolk, and then with milk. So what could explain this hugely significant step? New genetic analysis is providing the answer. Dr. Henrik Keisman has been using the platypus to investigate the DNA of the early mammals.
The platypus is really an amazing creature. It's really this crossover of a mammal and a reptile, right? And so it has a key position in the evolutionary analysis of all mammals.
First, he looked at the reduction in egg yolk. Reptiles have at least 3 genes that together manufacture their large yolk. Dr. Keisman has found that the platypus DNA records a dramatic change taking place in the early mammals.
We found only one egg yolk gene in the platypus genome that really was functional and was producing the egg yolk protein.
Presumably, the fact that there was only one gene which was producing yolk accounts for the fact that the platypus egg is so small.
Exactly.
The early mammals must have started to switch off their yolk genes. And Dr. Keisman has made a second key discovery. The trigger for this shutdown was the arrival of the genes that produce milk.
So you have the milk genes appearing that then allow for the subsequent loss of the egg yolk genes.
Yes.
The mammals began to favour milk over egg yolk as a way to nourish their young. And that is because milk has one key advantage. It's on tap, and that means that none of it need go to waste. And there's no limit on how much and for how long a mother can feed her young. Warm bodies, powerful senses, and now milk had allowed the early mammals like Hadrocodium to gain a foothold while the reptiles still ruled. But combining egg-laying with milk feeding brought a new challenge. A mammal mother could not leave the eggs to hatch by themselves as most reptiles do today. She had to stay with them. Then came a truly astonishing solution.
The egg, instead of being laid, was retained inside the body and started its development there, so that the young was born alive.
Apart from the monotremes, there are 2 other major groups of modern mammals around today: marsupials and placentals. It's thought that they first appeared around 160 million years ago. Both give birth to live young, but they do so in 2 very different ways. spectacular fossil beds in the north of China have, in recent years, produced the earliest ancestors yet found of these two groups. This is Liaoning province. 125 million years ago, volcanoes were erupting in this region. They left layer upon layer of yellow ash in these rocks. Excavations have revealed the fossilized remains of animals trapped in these layers and preserved in extraordinary detail.
This is a fossil that's been called Cynodelphis. Its skeleton is very easily seen, but around its skeleton there are dark marks, and close examination shows that they're fur. So we can be pretty sure that this is the fossil of a mammal, but its skeleton, and particularly its teeth, make it clear that it was a marsupial.
Marsupials were once distributed throughout the globe, but most are found today in Australia. And they allow us to see how their ancestors began to bring their young into the world alive. This is a sanctuary for breeding endangered species of wallaby through the use of foster mothers. Running the conservation project is Dr. David Taggart of the University of Adelaide. Today, he and his team are conducting a health check on a newly arrived baby wallaby, known as a joey.
This joey looks like it's about 2 grams, so about 16 days old. So 16 days ago, this young would have been born. All marsupial young are born very mature, so its ears are folded and the eyes are closed.
Instead of being enclosed in an egg when leaving its mother, like a baby echidna, this joey emerged directly from its mother's birth canal just 30 days after conception. Its front legs are more developed and strong enough for it to pull itself up through the fur and wriggle inside a feature that is unique to marsupials, a pouch. Here, there's a highly developed milk delivery system. The milk is channeled through long, fleshy tubes, teats. A wallaby mother has 4 of them and can even feed young of different ages at the same time.
She might have a young, just newly born, attached to one teat, and she'll have a young off its head in the pouch feeding from another teat. And those 2 teats will be producing a milk that is of different consistency. So one will be to nourish a newborn young, and the other's to nourish a young that's almost ready to wean. It's a great system.
The long teats also give the young a way to cling on to their mother as she moves around. This opossum is a marsupial that lives in South America, and it has no pouch. Its young seal their mouths so tightly round the teats they stay firmly attached. This may well be how the early marsupials like Cynodelphis carried their young around. They were now no longer tied to a nest or a burrow like the egg-laying mammals. But this method had one obvious drawback. Outside their mother's body, the newborn young were vulnerable to accident and exposed to disease. In China, new evidence is emerging for the pioneers of an even more radical solution.
At the same time as the marsupials appeared, another branch developed on the family tree of the mammals, a branch that we belong to. and it had a way of nurturing their young before birth.
I'm travelling to Beijing and its Museum of Natural History to see remarkably early evidence for this group. This is it. It's been called Juramaia, which means Jurassic Mother. Its bones, and in particular its teeth, identify it as a member of the mammal group to which we belong. But the key thing about it is its date. It's Jurassic, 160 million years old. And this makes Juramaia the earliest creature we know of that could have nurtured its young in a revolutionary new way. Juramaia lived and hunted in a world still dominated by the dinosaurs. But it may have had a powerful advantage. The ability for a mother to carry her young not outside her body like the marsupials, but inside, in a womb. To understand how Juramaia could have achieved this, we can look at one of its living descendants, the one that carries its young inside for the longest period of all mammals, the elephant. This is Dokun. She is part of a breeding program at Melbourne Zoo in Australia, and she is pregnant. Dr. Thomas Hildebrandt, one of the world's leading experts in mammal birth, is monitoring progress with an ultrasound scanner.
We study the longest pregnancy on the planet, which elephants have, with 22 months. And so ultrasound allows us non-invasively to see all the differences during the fetal development, which is quite exciting and was never done before.
More detailed 3D scans give us a spectacular view inside her womb. Even at an early stage of development, the baby's trunk is visible and moving. But we can also see the presence of a remarkable organ that evolved to make it possible to feed a developing baby before birth: the placenta. This baby elephant was born in the zoo just 3 weeks ago, and its placenta has been saved for analysis.
Here we have the elephant placenta of the baby, which is running outside the yard. These blood vessels form the umbilical cord, allowing to move all the nutrients to the baby and take all the waste material away.
On the underside is a ring of sponge-like tissue that attaches to the lining of the mother's womb and allows nutriment to flow in and waste to flow out. But it also operates as a life-saving barrier. Because half of the unborn baby's genes are from its father, it was under threat in the womb from its mother's immune system.
The baby is foreign material, it's an alien to the mother, and would be rejected if there's not this very specific system engaged which protects the baby against the maternal immune system.
Because the tissues of the placenta are composed of cells from both mother and baby, and the two blood supplies never mix, the baby is protected. This allows it to remain inside the womb until it's ready to survive in the outside world. Mammals equipped with this miracle of evolutionary engineering are known as placentals. It's likely that their earliest ancestors, like Juramaia, were the first to rear their young inside their bodies 160 million years ago. By now, the mammals had acquired all the key characteristics that define them as a group: hairy bodies, milk, and live birth. And this combination would eventually provide them with the platform for an astonishing explosion in diversity.
For millions of years, they remain the small shrew-like creatures that we've encountered so far, skittering about around the feet of the dinosaurs. But then came a sudden global catastrophe that threatened to bring the whole history of the vertebrates to a sudden end.
A meteor impact that sent shockwaves around the world and coincided with the extinction of the dinosaurs.
We're still not exactly sure why the dinosaurs disappeared, but certainly 65 million years ago they disappear from the fossil record. But many other vertebrates survived, and for them the dominance of the world was now up for grabs.
Scientists are unearthing stunning evidence in Germany for how the mammals seized this opportunity. This natural hollow is known as the Messel Pit. An entire community of animals was entombed here by an extraordinary freak of nature. 47 million years ago, this was a lake fringed by a subtropical rainforest, but its waters held a dark secret. The lake was in fact a flooded volcanic crater. It's thought that lethal carbon dioxide gas released from its depths periodically bubbled to the surface, killing the creatures that drank at its shore or flew over its waters. Their bodies drifted down to the bottom to be entombed in the muddy sediment. It's now one of the most remarkable fossil excavation sites in the world. Painstaking work is uncovering creatures sealed inside layers of the ancient lake bed. They're preserved in extraordinary detail. It's a unique snapshot of life after the dinosaurs. There are reptiles like lizards and snakes. Here too are ancient birds, the vertebrate group that evolved from the dinosaurs.
But the biggest changes are amongst the mammals. They have started to specialize. This, perhaps, is the least specialized of them. It's an insect eater, a creature like a large shrew, and its teeth are still relatively simple. But then there are also animals like this. And this has very big, gnawing front teeth. This is an early rodent, creature like a rat. And then bigger still is this animal. This has grinding molar teeth at the back and long legs. It's beginning to stand up on its toes. This is an early horse. And perhaps the most specialized and remarkable of all at this still very early date is this extraordinary specimen. This, as you can see, is a bat. And the preservation is so remarkable that the skin can be easily seen, not only on its forelegs, which turns them into wings, but even you can see this large ear on the side of its head, which suggests that already it was beginning to echolocate, to hear its own calls, so it navigates during flying.
The mammals were displaying an extraordinary ability to rapidly adapt their bodies, to fill the range of niches left vacant by the death of the dinosaurs. They had new opportunities, but they also faced a new evolutionary pressure: climate change. 10 million years of gradual global warming had triggered a surge in plant life. The land became covered in forests that grew ever denser and darker. New mammals emerged with new features that helped them to thrive in this changed environment. Features that would have huge significance for humans. This is an early member of the group of mammals that was going to produce us. This is an early primate. And you can see that on its front legs, its hands, they have an opposable thumb, so it could grasp. And the same on the back legs. The big toe is also opposable. So this animal was a climber. The primates could now reach food that was high up in trees. And it's thought that it was a new type of food that triggered another astonishing advance in their bodies. A major improvement in sight. Dr. Sandra Engels is part of a team investigating the diet of the fossilized primate from the Messel pit. Remarkably, she's able to examine the preserved contents of its gut.
We have particles of the last meal of this primate, and we analyzed it with very high magnification, and we found the oval outline of a seed, which is part of a fruit. And because we found it in the gut of this primate, we know that it fed on fruit.
3D scans of its teeth make it clear that fruit was a major part of its diet. This animal was a specialized fruit eater.
If we take a closer look to the shape of the teeth, we have structures as deep basins or rounder cusps that are the right tools to break up fruit.
47 million years ago, large fleshy fruit like this had only recently been developed by plants. It was one of the ways in which they had adapted to the new dense forest environments. Many early plants relied on the wind to distribute their seeds. But in the forest, there was little or no wind, so they had a problem. They solved it by recruiting the help of birds. And they did that by wrapping their seeds in an edible sweet flesh, fruit. Birds carried the seeds in their stomachs and eventually deposited them elsewhere in the forest. The primates had clearly begun to exploit this cosy arrangement, but to take full advantage, they needed to improve their vision. During the age of the dinosaurs, when the mammals were largely nocturnal, they had developed better night vision, but sacrificed a feature not needed in the dark, the ability to see colour. Today, most mammals still see the world largely in black and white. But the reptiles and their cousins, the birds, retained excellent colour vision. And the fruit-bearing plants had evolved a signalling arrangement to match. There's no point in having your seeds distributed before they're fully formed. So the plants evolved a colour coding system to show when that was. This plant, for example, here is a young fruit, still growing. Its flesh is hard and bitter, and it's green. But this fruit is fully formed. Its flesh is good to eat, soft, and the seed within is ready to go, and it's red. To spot a flash of red colour in amongst the green foliage is easy for a bird or a reptile. But for a mammal, with their nighttime vision, red and green are indistinguishable. Then, remarkably, some of the primates managed a feat no other mammal has achieved. They put evolution into reverse and reacquired colour vision. The common ancestor of this monkey and of me lived up in the trees in the daylight. And they quickly
evolved the ability to see colour and therefore to know which was ripe and which was unripe fruit, and so take advantage of the system that had already been worked out between the birds and the plants. Let's just see what she thinks about that. Which of those do you like? There's it.
After the dinosaur extinctions of 65 million years ago, the mammals were using their spectacular adaptability to evolve and diversify at an astonishing rate. In the process, they laid the foundations for the major mammal groups we see today. But then, around 47 million years ago, came a new set of problems.
The Earth's climate changed yet again. Many places became drier, and where that happened, the forest thinned out and was replaced by low scattered bushes and grass. And those new environments presented new challenges to animals and ushered in the age of the mammal monsters.
Scientists are finding stunning evidence of this change in the Great Plains of North America. This dramatic country in South Dakota is known as the Badlands. Streams and rivers have eroded the rocks into fantastic shapes. But 40 million years ago, these were layers of sediment laid down across an open floodplain. Paleontologist Clint Boyd is looking here for the fossilized remains of creatures from that ancient time. And he's finding mammals that are giants.
This is part of the bone that we call the femur, or the upper thigh bone. And this round surface right here is for the hip socket. And so you can see it's very large. We'd be talking about a very large animal. And not only do we have the thigh bone, but we've got ankle bones spread out over here, and then cascading down from that spot, we've got some of the toe bones coming down. So if we add all this up together based on the size, we're looking at an animal that's probably about 2 meters tall at the hips.
The creature is known as a titanothere. It was a herbivore. It fed on the lush vegetation that once covered this area of the United States. A range of different specimens have been collected at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science. And they reveal that the first titanotheres were built on a much smaller scale.
When titanotheres first appear on the scene, they look like this. This is the lower jaw of one of the first titanotheres, and it's one of these sheep-sized animals. In only 5 million years, members of the group go from sheep-sized to about the size of a small horse. Within only 15 million years of their first appearance, titanotheres look like this. Here you can see the skull of one of these titanotheres.
In evolutionary terms, the size increase is astonishingly quick. But what drove this remarkable change? Another fossil could provide an explanation. It dates back to the time of the first and smallest titanotheres, but it's a very different type of mammal.
This is the skull of Malphelus badwaterensis, the bad cat from Badwater. And this was the largest predator at the time. This is the skull. This large crest is for large jaw muscles, which would have given a powerful shearing bite that ran these blade-like teeth, perfect for chopping up a titanothere. And what's very interesting is that Malphelus was exactly the same size as the top herbivores of the time, like titanotheres.
The earliest titanotheres could hide from these bad cats in the dense forest environments. But as those forests began to thin out, the titanotheres were more vulnerable to attack. One way to improve their chances was to grow bigger.
An herbivore is much more likely to survive an encounter with a predator if it's a little bit larger. And so there was a bit of an arms race between the predators and the prey. And animals like titanotheres were able to escape this predator pressure by becoming the supersized giants we see 35 million years ago.
Fossilized remains of titanotheres from the Badlands of South Dakota and elsewhere across the Great Plains allow us to reconstruct its rapid growth spurt. From modest beginnings, they increased their bulk 10 times over, till the largest stood over 8 feet tall. On the open grasslands that increasingly covered the earth, many other giant mammals emerged. Together, they're known as the megafauna. This giant sloth was found in California. In China, I've come to see the remains of mammoths. And a remarkable creature that was the largest land mammal to walk this earth.
This great beast is called Paraceratotherium. It stood 5 meters tall and nearly 8 meters long. Those furry little mammals scampering about in the shadows have produced descendants that could stare the biggest dinosaur in the eye.
Today, the elephant is one of the few species of megafauna to have survived. But those outsized versions have otherwise disappeared from the planet. So what happened to them? Their eventual extinction coincides with another key event in the history of the Earth. From around 2.5 million years ago, ice sheets spread down from the north and up from the south to cover vast areas of the continents. But it was only when the ice finally retreated, just 10,000 years ago, that the megafauna vanished.
Some have blamed that on the rise and falls of temperature as the Ice Age finally came to a close. But others have sought the culprit amongst the mammals themselves, a newly evolved super predator.
To see some of the earliest evidence for its arrival in China, I've returned to Beijing. These fossilized remains belong to a primate. It's been dated to around 68,000 years ago. This primate had 2 new evolutionary features. First, its pelvis. An animal with a pelvis like this would have been able to walk upright. Secondly, the skull. Its brain case is enormous. In proportion to the size of its body, it's 6 times the average mammal size, and that would have brought great intelligence. And this creature, of course, was a human being. The early humans put their new intelligence to deadly use. They worked out how to make weapons. These stones, carefully chipped to form sharp blades, were found alongside human remains. And they developed new powers of communication that enabled them to join forces and hunt in teams. This was a new kind of predator. It first appeared in Africa and then spread to all the other continents. and each time its appearance in that continent coincided more or less with the disappearance of the megafauna, which suggests, at the very least, that this creature had something to do with that event. To conclude my journey in China and find the last step in our evolutionary story, I'm back in Kunming City to visit one of its busiest maternity wards. An enlarged brain brought us huge advantages, but its size also presented a basic design problem at birth. The bony skull encasing the brain still had to make it out through the mother's birth canal. A new addition to our species, just 12 hours old, can reveal how this is possible.
Oh dear, dear. This little boy's name is Xiaobao. It means little treasure. He was born because of a special feature in his skull. Mammal skulls are made up of separate bones, and in most species, those are fused together at the time of birth to form a hard, bony box to protect that most special organ, the brain. But not so with Xiaobao and other human beings. They remained separate, and that allowed his head to slightly change shape and squeeze through the aperture of his mother's pelvis.
This also allows the brain to continue to grow and develop after birth. In fact, the plates won't start to fuse until Xiaobao is around 2 years old. It's one of the most recent in a long line of remarkable evolutionary developments that allowed the vertebrates, animals with a backbone, to create the dazzling diversity we see around us today.
Xiaobao's ancestry, like that of all of us, stretches back over 500 million years to a tiny little worm-like creature swimming in the bottom of the sea.
His backbone and jaw came from the early fish. His limbs and lungs from amphibians. The reptiles gave him his watertight skin. Tiny nocturnal mammals donated a bigger brain, sharper senses, and the manner in which he was born. His hands and colour vision came from the fruit-eating primates, and his larger brain and greater intelligence from the first humans.
So all our features of our body can be traced back to our ancient ancestors, and there's much more we have yet to learn about them. But one thing is certain, the evolution of the vertebrates has not yet come to an end.